The universe has a funny way of showing us lessons that we need. I was prepping and trying to start recording, and all these negative self talk started popping up in my head. Like, what are you wearing? I changed my outfit a few times. Your hair looks funny, so I put it up in a bun. Perfect time to tackle this thing of negative self talk and how it is related also to larger things, things that are connected to emotional roots. Not only that, they are connected to our unconscious self-limiting beliefs. And they can really get in the way of us not just becoming who we want to be and going after what we want, but just really ruining our day for no damn reason. So I want to tackle this topic today, and I hope you walk away with practical tools to help you start to shift and reframe the way that you talk to yourself. You all know what negative self-talk sounds like. I'm not good enough to do this. No one's ever going to love me. Why bother trying to make new friends? Nobody likes me. Everyone else gets what they want but me. Today's going to be horrible. Why are you not doing more? It goes on and on and on. Oftentimes, they're cognitive distortions. So a lot of these thoughts or statements sound like all or nothing statements, or they're a generalization, or it's mind reading, presuming you know something to be true. None of those things benefit the person thinking it. The thing about negative self-talk, just like our tendency towards negative bias, is normal. It's human, but I don't think we need to normalize it. Although I love characters like Larry David because it's so funny to watch him complain about anything and everything that happens in his life. When this happens internally in your head, the voice that you're with 24/7, all day, every day, it truly becomes a hindrance in the way you feel, in the way that you take action, the way you interact with other people, and so much more. Like I said earlier, a lot of our negative self-talk, they're essentially an expression, an outward expression, even though it's in our head, of deeper rooted emotional wounds, let's call them, or they are a part of the self-limiting beliefs that we have written. And when our negative self-talk is happening, it's predicting failure, it's claiming inherent badness or inherent brokenness. And the most frightening and empowering thing to realize is that just how significantly your life and your experiences can shift just by starting to take responsibility for your mind. I'll give you some examples on how our mindset can be so significantly impactful. On one of my videos where I talked about either self-worth or quiet confidence, someone had commented something along the lines of, it's so much easier to have confidence or high self-worth if the individual is beautiful. Okay, fair. I'm not going to deny pretty privilege is a thing, but I have known so many beautiful women who feels broken inside, who feels insecure, that no matter how much people tell them externally, affirming of their beauty and their worthiness, if they don't feel it inside, if their program isn't written to align with that reality that everyone else is experiencing, they don't feel it, and it shows. In another example, imagine there's a job position that's open and you have two candidates with the exact same resume somehow, the same experience and the same skill sets. On paper, they're the same, but one of them just believes in himself for whatever reason, and the other one is uncertain and doesn't know if he actually has what it takes for this role. Who do you think will come out on top? The only thing different here is their own mental dialogue, the inner landscape of who they think they are, what their worth is, and how they talk to themselves. And not only that, negative self-talk, or the programming of it, the negative self-talk just is an expression of that program, creates a lot of unnecessary stress. And while stress in small increments or in certain ways is good for us, prolonged stress in this way can create physiological issues, such as cardiovascular issues, inflammation, etc. I don't think anyone can argue for the fact that our inner dialogue contributes a lot to our stress. If that is something you experience, it's a voice that you are stuck with all day long. And to put it more simply, if our inner critic worked, if criticizing ourselves and putting on unnecessary negative self-talk on ourselves works, we would all be perfect human beings. And at the end of the video, I will share practical ways for us to harness or transform the way we talk to ourselves or our inner dialogue. And it's not by trying to repress them or control them or having no thoughts at all, because that simply just doesn't work. Because I've gone down this road for quite some time now, I have done that work where you go back into your past and you figure out where those voices came from. Was it your parents, caretaker, friends, siblings, peers, teachers? Where did those initial critical, harsh, negative self-talk come from? And at some point, you might come to realize and you go, oh, yeah, those aren't my voices. I wasn't born criticizing myself. I picked them up along the way or from my own experiences. But then you kind of hit a wall. Okay, I know the origin of where these patterns came from. Now what? I find that it is always helpful to figure out the how we got here. But then the most important part, the most useful part, is actually focusing our energy on now. From this moment onward, in this very moment, what can I do? How can we be different? I want you to think of shifting that inner dialogue or monologue not as fixing what's broken, but simply a software update. Life inevitably happens to all of us, and there's plenty of things that's outside of our control. Similarly with other people, there's just not much we can do to control anybody else. But that power, that responsibility that lies within our minds, that is something to tap into. That is something to harness. Something like death, grief, loss can either be a somber experience, or I remember being on the street one day just by pure coincidence. There was a funeral procession happening. I was in Bali at the time, and people were singing and dancing, and it seemed like the whole village were there to celebrate this person that had passed. And it was truly a joyous experience. Achieving a goal that you've been wanting to achieve can feel very different depending on how you perceive and how you talk to yourself. For one person, it could be a celebration, taking a long moment to pat themselves on the back and to feel proud. For another person, it's a reminder of all the other goals that are still ahead of them that they have yet to achieve, and they quickly fall back into this not enough place, even though they've just achieved a goal that they've been wanting to for so long. I am definitely guilty of doing that all the time. The point I am making here is that human experiences and challenges are universal, and the underlying emotions we all feel, the big feelings we all feel, everyone shares them. But there is an individual choice every time. What colors will you choose to paint the story? What words will you decide on when you write this story? And this can change everything. Literally every thought we have is a story. A lot of things are subjective, and it's all up to our own sense making, meaning making, interpretation. And if every thought is a story, if every interpretation is a story, then you get to become the writer and the narrator. Imagine if there was a manual on how you operated and how you function. How fun is it to think that you get to choose the aesthetics, the vibes, the atmosphere, and the thoughts that you have and the belief systems that you choose? Those are what moves the storyline, the plot forward. Starting from today, decide to step into that role of the writer and the narrator and take that responsibility, which in itself is truly a power. So as you begin to play with, experiment with, and shift your internal dialogue or to stop your negative self-talk, I don't want you to think of your self-talk as good or bad, right or wrong. Because if you think you're doing something wrong or something bad, it starts to create this frustrating loop of self-blame, shame, guilt, and more negative self-talk. So instead of being more negative when you catch yourself having a negative self-talk or thought, experiment with this instead. Next time you catch yourself in a negative thought that is unproductive, ask yourself in that moment, what other options do I have right now? What other thought could I choose instead of this one? And remember, we're not trying to shut out the thoughts or control them. That just isn't very effective. When we try to just shut down thoughts or feelings, it's kind of like just stuffing them down deeper and deeper and deeper, and it gets congested and constipated in there, and then sometimes they tend to burst out all of a sudden or create more friction. What we're trying to do instead is to harness and transform them. Once you accept that this process is not about good or bad, right or wrong, and once you understand that we're not trying to control or suppress our thoughts, instead we're trying to work with them, the third thing to decide right now is that you are not your thoughts. And not just that, but that you are indeed, in fact, truly empowered to choose, that you have the ability, you just need the tool to get there. Even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes, it feels like our inner dialogue is in control of us. Decide right now that that belief is untrue and that there is an alternative option for you starting today. Here's an example. Let's say you've been wanting to make new friends, but in the past you haven't had a lot of luck with it. So one of your negative self-talk or belief is that people don't like me, I am not good at making friends. So you want to shift this belief. So instead of choosing that, you think, what options do I have? And you choose, I am open to the possibility that I can indeed make meaningful friendships. Now, if you start to question whether or not this belief is true or not, you can start to find holes in it. You can say, well, there's no evidence that supports this belief, or there's plenty of people that are lonely out there, or it could just be a waste of my time. So instead of thinking whether or not a belief is true for you, a new, better belief, just ask, is this a more beneficial thought for me? And this new option, this new thought, should feel more open and spacious because the limiting belief or the negative self-talk is constricted. Instead of thinking, I'm never going to find or be in the relationship that I want. One option of a different belief or thought could be that I am open to meeting someone wonderful. When you're doing this process, you might try and avoid extremes where it's like, I'll never or I'll always, and find something that is, again, creates openness, pliable energy, and something that you can move forward with. Choose a possibility that feels good and is realistic. And you can take steps to continue to transform that thought as you get closer and closer to shifting and becoming that version or having those experiences. So if you're someone that has been sitting on your butt every day for the last 5 years, you're not going to be able to run a full marathon right away, but you can start with, I'm going to take 10K steps a day, and then I'm going to run a mile, and then I'm going to run 2 and 3, so on and so forth. We can guide ourselves gradually to the other side, so to speak. Another important part when you're experimenting with this is to feel into this negative self-talk, this inner dialogue. How do you relate to this voice that comes up to you? Because there is another you who is hearing the voices. How does that part of you relate to the negative self-talk? Does it agree? Does it feel angry? Does it feel saddened by it? Is it compassionate? Is it curious? How does the other part, the higher self, if you want to call it that way to help you distinguish, how does it relate to these voices that come up that doesn't serve you? And experiment with approaching it differently. What if you approached it with curiosity? What if you approached it with love or kindness? What if you approached it with anger? What if you try to debate it out of existence? Experiment next time you find yourself in the negative thought or a negative self-talk loop and play with it. See how you can relate to it in a different way and what outcome that produces and how it makes you feel. Does it help you move forward or does it keep you stuck? And another question to ask yourself is, what kind of relationship do you want to have with yourself? I know so many people, myself included in the past, who sat down and took the time to write down this perfect list of a relationship I want to be in. But how often do we spend time contemplating what type of relationship we want to have with ourselves? Arguably the most important relationship, as it stays with us for the rest of our lives. So what are the qualities you want to foster in your internal dialogue? Do you want to be supportive, but also realistic? Do you want to challenge yourself when you feel like you're way over your head? Do you want to let them know and comfort them when they feel like nothing is going right? What are the qualities and elements of a partnership that you would want within yourself? Because a lot of times, even though it sounds crazy, we are having dialogues within our own minds all day long. and you're trying to either convince yourself of something or disprove of something. So, what is that dynamic? How do you want it to feel? And one last tip I want to share is this idea of distancing. And I heard it from Ethan Cross on a podcast. You know, when people say, do as I say, not as I do, a lot of times we're really good at giving other people advice, but we're really bad at taking our own. So it has always helped me when I'm caught in a loop of negative spiraling to see myself as a separate entity and to have that dualistic conversation with myself. And sometimes it's even helpful to literally speak out loud to myself as if I was talking to another person. I know it sounds completely insane, but that distance that we're able to create first takes us down from that ledge of spiraling out of control, and it creates that spaciousness to be more objective, to be able to zoom out into the bigger picture versus feeling just completely immersed and drowning in our thoughts and our feelings. And the very last point I want to make about it is this. Today's video is largely focused on our thoughts. But as we know, emotions are a big part of this too. Feeling our feelings are a big part of this too. And I do want to make a video on this because I definitely have had to work on this a lot, and it's come up for me recently. And in the last 2 days, I don't know what's gotten into me, but I'll just be listening to like a story or watching something, and this pulse happens, this floodgate seems like it's opening, and it's not sadness I feel, it's just emotional. And I'm trying to welcome it because I think over the years I've gotten so good at keeping these feelings quieted or not letting them express themselves that I've gotten really good at ignoring them to a point where I don't even realize something is coming up for me. And so that's another component of this, is that there are emotions attached to the ways that we think and to the patterns that we inhabit in our minds. But that's going to be for another. Sorry, my camera cut out and I didn't want to replace the battery because I got to get out of here. So again, I want to talk about the emotional component in a later video. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments below, and until next time.